Today is January 20th, 2023. We are interviewing Leslie Darvas in Toronto, Canada. Leslie, if we can just ask you some questions, first of all, about where and when you were born, what year?
Yeah, 1936, May the 31st, old Stone Ages.
Where were you born? Do you remember?
Budapest.
Can you tell us about your first memories?
Okay, I born in Budapest, 1936, and I came from a very religious family, Orthodox family. And my father was Orthodox, but he was the only one who actually had a real training. He was a printer, a typesetter, and he spoke better German than a German. And I went to Jewish school in 1942, sorry. At that time, the anti-Semitism obviously existed in Hungary. They have numerous clauses that how many kids can go, how many people can go to university, how many could go certain trades, and on and on. But I didn't felt it at that time. Anyway, I went to the Jewish school, and not in 1943 it started to get worse because they came out with the cartoons, anti-Semitic cartoons, how the Jews doing that, the Jews that. At that time I was still young, but I heard about in the 1930s they had what they called blood trials in Hungary, which means they accused the Jews that they killed young Christian kids, took their blood to make matzah. Actually, and the so-called loving church was always very anti-Semitic and very much against the Jews. In 1944...
We'll go back for a minute. Can you describe, do you have any memories of your home, where you lived?
Yes. Well, I lived till the age of 5. We had a house in the suburb of Budapest. They call it Pest-Újhely. And my grandfather, who was a very Orthodox rabbi, he had a house there too. And then when it came to the school, actually it was a beautiful house with a big backyard, fruits, everything. Then when I had to go to school, we moved into Budapest. And I wasn't exactly a cating, it's a one-bedroom apartment with the common toilets for the whole floor area, you know, everything else. But it was there was no school bus or anything. We had to walk to the school, which was at that time approximately was a kilometer. And in the school, it was very, very interesting. We had to say like an oath to the Hungarian people, and then we said the Shema Yisrael. The last time when I was traveling for vacation to my grandfather, who was a rabbi right at the border town called St. Gotthard. Actually, the Jewish cemetery was about 100 meters from the cemetery. And he was a fantastic person. I loved that, and I learned a lot of things. And then at that time, which was very interesting, Polish people started to escape from Poland and through Hungary. And where do they go first? To the rabbi. So he called together the congregation. I was a small kid, and I was kneeling in the corner and listened. Unfortunately, the Hungarians had a very bad tendency. They were willing to give them money, those people, but they said it couldn't happen to us because we are not Polacks. We are Hungarians. That was the attitude. And then, like I said, it stayed in my mind. And later in 1942, they started, 42 or 43, I'm not sure, they started to get the Jewish men from 18 to 50 called them in for forced labor camp. My father at that time didn't. My grandfather died in 44 January. We went on to the cemetery, and my grandmother wanted us to stay because Budapest was constantly got bombing from the air. Luckily, we didn't stay. We got back, and again another luck, because 1 week later Jews were not allowed to travel. And then it started to...
So you stayed at your grandmother's?
Pardon me? No, we didn't stay.
Oh, you did not.
No, we didn't. That was a lucky thing, you know. Anyway, we still lived together. We saw the anti-Semitic remarks, the walks, you know, that kids were Hitler young uniform, everything else, but actually was relatively peaceful. Then in 1944...
Do you remember any stories or anything about that time?
Well, they had demonstrations, you know, because Hungary joined the Germans to fight against the Russians. Actually, that was one way a good thing. You know why? Because they didn't invade Hungary. Any country where they invaded, they took the Jews. However, like I said, anti-Semitism grew because all the pictures and talks and everything else. Then in 1944, March 15, it stays in my mind, the Germans actually invaded Hungary. That's when it started. The Jews had to wear yellow stars. They closed the Jewish school in April. They chose the Jewish schools, and they forcibly took more people to these camps.
Do you remember how you heard about wearing your...
Well, I heard every day that somebody gone or anything. And then, in June, we forced to leave our home and go to so-called Jugend homes. I don't know, it was Jewish homes. Actually, on one way, that place was good because that was eventually was in the ghetto. So in June...
How did you get there?
Pardon me?
How did you get there?
We walked, but some of the stuff, you know, we hired a horse and buggy guy and took, and there was an uncle of us, and he shared with us a one-bedroom home.
What did you bring?
Clothing. Basically, that's all. I mean, what else do you... Oh, a bed, because you have to sleep somewhere. Anyway, it was a tight place, and we had still a relative free move. Then they came out the rules. The Jews, if they travel on the streetcar, has to be on the last row. Then the same last row in the movies. But it's eventually, even that one is gone. Then they started imposing more and more restrictions on Jews.
And how did you feel?
How would I say it? On one hand, I didn't care. One hand, I cared very much my relatives, because at that time in June, when we went to Juden homes, anybody outside of Budapest, they made the ghettos for the outside, and that ghettos were very fast moved into Auschwitz. They took my even where we had our home in the greater Budapest, they took my grandmother to Auschwitz to kill her. We heard that, and I still remember that my grandmother, who used to live in St. Gotthard, whose husband was a rabbi, sent a letter, please send us some clothing from the ghetto. And when we came back with the post, address non-existing. That means they already took them to Auschwitz.
Is that how you found out?
Yes. Yes, in Auschwitz. Then, like I said, it started to get worse and worse. And then we heard about, that was this, still, the food was on how would you call it, ration. We got tickets to buy food, or everything else was ration.
What did you eat?
Pardon me?
Do you remember what you ate? What they had?
How do you mean?
What food did you eat?
Well, very, very basic food. We didn't do anything basically because Jews were not allowed to work or anything like that, you know.
Did you go to school?
Pardon me?
Did you go to school? Did you learn? Were you educated while you were there?
No. There was nothing, you know, to do. Only thing was, you know, that like every other kids, you know, we tried to play football from old sacks put together and we kicked them around. But even then we had to watch because just in case, so if the Hungarian fascists came, because they were tough. Then in October 1944, the Hungarian fascists took over the country, the whole government. And the same day they took us out from the Juden houses, we all had to come out, put on, it was unbelievable, if anything, rings, watches, dentures, everything we had to put on, plus they went into the homes and rubbing it, and then they took us about 15 kilometers away, an old brick factory. And the way we walked with arms up, and my mother tried to push me always in because they always kick people. They hit a heavy, very fat guy. They beat it up, then they got 4 weak guys to carry it and on and on. And that's when the first time I came to thought, what the hell happening? Maybe there were 30 of these fascists, Hungarian fascists were carrying us with single-shot rifles, and nobody does anything. And they beat people and everything. And I would say at least 20,000 people. Anyway, we got out to that brick factory, outdoor, we just were there. But one thing which we noticed, that they had parts where the earth moved, which is probably, they said, that was the cemetery parts where they buried people, and some of them probably would still alive because it's moved. Anyway, they kicked us for 3 days.
Were you scared?
Pardon me?
Were you afraid when you...
No, I was a young kid. I didn't have fear. I just wondered. I was wondering what the hell is happening and why nobody does anything, you know? And they stayed with me for the rest of my life. Then, for 3 days we were day and night outside on the door, and no food, nothing, everything, you know.
Where were you?
Pardon me?
Where were you?
On that old brick factory.
Inside.
Yeah, and the rumor was that they taking us deportation to concentration camp. And at that time was the first time I saw German soldiers in uniform over there. And I don't know what happened, but 3 days later they got up everybody, and we walked back and we walked straight into the ghetto, which was a lucky thing. But 2 days later, they took my father and my mother. My mother, they deported her to Ravensburg. And later on I found out they had a big, horse race park, and that's where they kept them, and they took them to Rome, and they walked all the way from Budapest to Ravensburg, you know. And it was a death camp, and they put them to work, and they had to work 12 hours a day. My mother was a heavier woman. When she left, she was 170 pounds. When she came home, I hardly recognized her in that uniform, you know, that like a prisoner, and she was 90 pounds. But thanks God she survived. My father was put into a special place in Austria where they forged money, documents, and stuff like that. But what happened there? My father learned his trade in Germany. He spoke better German than a German, plus he was over 190 centimeters tall. And in the World War I, he was a master sergeant. Not because he was such a good soldier, but he was the only one from 400 people group, including an officer, who could speak and write German and Hungarian. And he escaped because he could play that he's a German with his accent and everything else, you know. And surprisingly, he got in. oh, before it happened, you heard about that Swedish diplomat who wanted to save Jews, and they set up special houses, what they called, okay, there is a Swedish citizen, and actually the Zionist organization forged the papers to go there. So I had an uncle and an aunt, both of them died after the thing. One of them had a diabetic, which she went blind. Another one had asthma that she barely could breathe. So actually I looked after them, not they looked after me. We went to that Swedish place, and then we heard that they're starting to take the Jews out and shooting them, because it was right at the Danube River, starting to shoot them, which has happened through. And my father, that was in the middle of December, just about a month before the Russians took Budapest. He escaped and found me, took it off the Yellow Star. He was like that. He was brave, you wouldn't believe it. And he took me, and he said, only place we can go to the Ghetto. And he played a game, so they let him into the game that they thought that he's a German official. And it was terrible. I can't tell you the conditions, that everybody got lice, including myself, and I don't know how they call that sickness in English, that blood came through the stool, and there was no medicine, nothing. The typhoid was running wild, and that Jewish school where I used to go, that was a temporary hospital where on the floor they lie the people, and they used paper for bandage because there was nothing else. I saw that, myself, because I volunteered for a runner so I can get an extra slice of bread. Because every day the food, people had to go to the Juden Council, the Jewish center, and they got the big cans and the bread, and they took it in and sliced, and we took turns who is the last, because the bottom was more beans to get it. But it was terrible, like I said, people were sick like that. And for heat, we went into the bombed-out houses. We didn't care what happening, and we broke those old windows and doors and everything. I personally, my shoe, the sole gone. So I put in paper and a sail, and with a string, we turned it around to have it. They had to cure. I got some frostbite on my toes, so after the war for about 2 years, they were treating me against that frostbite. And like I said, one interesting thing was, that we know that we were watching very much, because Hungarian fascists used to come in to the ghetto, put everybody down into the cellar, and they throw in hand grenades. Actually, the Hungarians did all those things, and not the Germans. And then, suddenly, December the 15th, the Russian troops came in, they broke the ghetto wall. Actually, a Russian soldier gave me bread, and they do one thing which I saw with my own eye. The middle of the ghetto, they had a public bath. Over there, very poor people had bathrooms. So, you go down once, and that bathroom was like a house, the whole bathroom, and had a very, very big front and backyard, and had a fence which was about 2 meters high, and it was filled up with dead bodies. I saw that, unfortunately. And the first thing what the Russians did, they went, those Germans who they grabbed, to take these people to bury, and it was so cold, that was the coldest winter Hungary, which was partly good because that didn't have a worst infection. They couldn't even take apart the bodies, so sometimes 2 or 3 was together frozen. They took it, and on public parks, they used dynamite or hand grenade to making mass graves. And the same thing you heard about the Otto synagogue. That was Europe's biggest synagogue. It was beautiful, you know, unbelievable. It's built in a Greek style. They had a big shul. Then they had, like you see on the movie, a big yard going about 80 meters and with a hallway, you know, like they show in the Greek. The other end was a smaller shul, what they called the Heroes Shul. That's for the remembrance for the Jews. Actually, that's where I got married, you know. And there is, I would say, at least 10,000 people in the mass graves over there. I don't think it's ever been excavated because there was no use. You don't even know who were there. So, like I said, and it's finished the things, and
So the Russians liberated you?
yes, Russia liberated us, and like I said, the joint started to send in some food, you know, and but we had no electricity, no.
Where did you go?
Pardon me?
Where did you go when they liberated you?
I had nowhere else to go, just to stay in the ghetto, or that place, because what happened there was, when we went back to the old home, somebody occupied that who had supposed to be his house was bombed out, you know, so we couldn't get it back. They took it, and we stayed, and eventually, in the same house where we were a ghetto, they had an apartment which had. It was very, very big, 2 rooms, hallways and everything else, and eventually moved in, we shared that with another family with 3 kids, you know. So we were there, but it was just after when my mother came home. My mother came home approximately in September. And one thing which stays in my mind, that all those who came back, they had to go down in the shul, they call it Bethlehem shul. It was, again, it was a shul. He had to go there for disinfection, and you know, set up mobile things, everything, and there was no such a thing as shame. Man, woman, truck, naked, everything. I waited her inside in the shul, and beside me was 2 skeletons. It was already in 1945 late. That's people who died there. You see, you find dead bodies for a long, long time because a lot of those houses were bombed. And you can smell it. In whole Budapest, you could smell the death. The only thing which, like I said, and late in, I guess I read in March, they opened a Jewish school, and we were sitting on the floor because they burned up the desk, you know, everything to use that. It was a very short thing, and you won't believe it, we were lucky to have what we take with us 2 slices of bread, and that is a little bit of fat or everything. That was our so-called lunch. But slowly the life started to go back, but how should I say it? One thing which happened with me that made me, I wanted to kill. Tell you honestly, I said it never can happen, and never let it happen. And I lied about my age. Over there they had a paramilitary outfit. You see, everybody goes to military duty, and that paramilitary thing gave a very, very basic training when you go to the army.
How old?
Pardon me?
How old were you?
13, and I lied because the basic age was 15, and I went to flight training. So at 14, I was a pilot, and another thing was that you had to have 2 parachute jumps if you are a pilot, and I stayed with it. And I became instructor, master parachutist, something, because that gave me an opportunity. And I went to a special school where they how would I say it, flight engineering school, aircraft mechanic and stuff like that. And I went to school, and from the school I went to work for that outfit.
Did they know you were Jewish?
I was, they smelled it. Listen, Hungarians can smell it. But under the communist system, you couldn't say nothing. You couldn't be a dirty Jew, except you could be a Zionist agent. You know, it was different. Anyway, I was there, and how should I say it? I trained hundreds of people for parachuting, dropped them. I jumped nighttime, daytime, proved that you can jump. You know, the system, they used to drop from 800 meters, the people, and you were a sitting duck. I proved that you can drop people to 800 meters completely safe. I said, and at the same time, because I automatically became a reserve officer in that outfit. And I took all the courses, master sniper, everything, and it came handy because turned out the revolution. The revolution, every district had a military command. And they can mobilize officers, reserve officers, everyone in 2 hours and others, so and so. So, actually, when the revolution started out, I was with my wife in a movie. At that time, I was married. And we came home and we heard the things, the people demonstrating everything. I didn't know what happened. Then started the fighting. They called me in, and we went out. Basically, we took over the police work, not that much fighting against the Russians, because the police disbanded. And I tell you one thing, I was basically same area where the ghetto of the Jewish lived. And first thing what this fascist said, Isaac, we don't take you this time to Auschwitz. So I was a very bad shot. The Russians were there and I was shooting that way. There was each patrol had about 10 people, and we were about a couple of Jews there too. There was one interesting thing was we heard yelling. It was the house right beside where my parents lived, and you know, over there they're drafting everybody. Everybody had to serve 2 or 3 years. And they had...
Men.
Pardon me?
Just men.
Yeah, they have to serve, but they had a very interesting, that secret police, the AVO, which was a political force, had a civilian, which was a civilian all thing, but had an armed part too. They were the guards for the factories, God knows what. And on that house lived a Jewish kid who was a plumber. And they took him to that military service there. And when these fascists came, because he wore that uniform of the hated police, they wanted to hang him from the railings of the 2nd floor. So we went in and we had a little firefight, but we saved him. And it went on and on and on. And the dying day, when my Budapest was not fighting anymore, we got married with my wife, and the next thing was...
Where did you meet her?
Pardon me?
Where did you meet her?
We were the same hospital 2 days apart. That's one thing. We went to the same school, except the boys were in a different area than the girls. We lived within a block from each other. All my life I knew her. And what happened there was, I broke my leg at one parachute jump. And I was out with crutches, standing outside the front of our house, and she's coming. She looked very beautiful, and was not girl anymore. And we started talking, and I said, let's go on dancing. He said, you crazy? I said, yes. So we went on dancing. I took her home because at 11 o'clock in Hungary, a girl has to be home because they're locking the gates. Anyway, I took her home.
It was a gated...
Oh, no, they have a big door, a very big door, you know, like the size of that wall to there. on every house, this big door. And at 11 o'clock, they're locking it.
Okay.
And opening 6 o'clock. They had a housemaster, whatever call it. And if you are late, you're coming in, you have to ring, and you had to pay for it, that she opens for you the door. Anyway, I went home. At midnight, I felt I'm dying. I called the ambulance. They took me back to the Air Force Hospital. And over there, just once a week, they had visiting. That was in August. So I called her up because I was bored. Come visit me. And look what happened. And then we got engaged about November. I had my own apartment because I was privileged position.
She lived with her parents?
Yes. Yes, she has 2 sisters.
In a gated home?
Yeah, they lived at home. And the rule was in Hungary, they treated me like a king, because the rule in the old country that the first oldest girl has to get married first. And the middle girl was already engaged.
Whose rule?
Pardon me?
Whose rule?
I don't know. It was for centuries. It was a custom. I don't know if it's a custom or rule or whatever. So everybody treated me like a prince. Then it was finished eventually. Anyway, I had my own apartment because my positions and everything. So we married, and on the wedding, I had my pistol in my pocket, and a few guests, about 5 people, they all had ornament with them. Because they had time change that after 8 o'clock you cannot be on the street or everything. So these guys stayed and they had the ornament. So we had the wedding, and then 2 days later the family decided that we live in Hungary. That was my father-in-law, everything. So we made a deal, they living first and I going second, because I tried to get everything was possible out. So they went out, and they had, I was one of the few who had phone. So they phoned with that, and he said, bring money because you can exchange it here good. So we sold everything, piano, you name it, to have the money. And we went. First time when we went, we actually got cut.
Where did you go?
Toward the border. And we walked toward the border about 20 kilometers, but the border patrol catched us, not just us, they catched us, but I don't know how many people. They took us in the city, in a, basically, it's not a jail, it was used to be a military barrack. And then, I don't know how, like I was wearing my leather coat, which is only the pilot wearing it, you know, but no rank on it or anything. So anyway, we coming out from the basement, a guard saluted, I saluted, and we came out. Then I remembered that I have a relative who was the only Danube sea-going vessel captain who was living right at the border. So when we forged a document, I have business in there. And I don't know, it's a luck or brain, we took the first car behind the rail, behind the locomotive. Anyway, we got to the cable in the police that I showed the paper, everything okay. Then when we get to the border, you see here is the station, then they had a fence and everything, but the train is long enough to overrunning the fence. Anybody who went through the station got arrested. We didn't. So actually I had to ask I had the address, how I got there. I mean, last time he saw me, I was 10 years old. So he said, oh, when do you want to go over? I told him. He said, okay, take a bath, have something to eat, and 6 o'clock we at the railway station. What? Never mind. There was a guy, I paid him 800 forint, which is at that time was about the average person 1 week wage. And then we started walking, and on the route we met a girl who was carrying a luggage.
How many of you were there?
Just two of us.
Just you and your wife?
Two and the guy who was taking us. But we met that girl. He carrying the luggage, very heavy luggage, so I am a gentleman, I help you. Anyway, suddenly the guy said, you see those lights? I said, yes, that's Austria. Goodbye. So we walked there, so what to do? We went to the police station. He said that, whoever said, no problem, he said, we have here a central point, you know. The girl said, can I use your phone? My brother is the third secretary of the U.S. Embassy. Said, sure. Oh, and policeman, I gave my pistol.
Why?
Because foreign country, I don't want to carry arms.
How did you find this person to walk you?
Oh, they found that, those relatives. They knew what happened, you know, the wholesale business. Anyway, about 80 minutes later came a big Mercedes with the American flag on it. Where is my niece? Big kiss, said, okay, come on. I said, can I go with you to Vienna? They said, yes. So, and it put me down at midnight, second day of Christmas, in the middle of Vienna. And we stand there and we didn't know what to do. We heard about a Rothschild hospital. I don't know if you heard about it. It was a Rothschild people who set up for escapees and immigrants who has no place to live, you know, to temporary place to live. Anyway, I said, we have to go there, but how? So there came a guy and he broke it. I spoke Russian, but very poor German. He said, bitte schön, sagen Sie mir, weiß Gott, speak Hungarian. So I told him what happened. He went to a taxi driver and told him, take these people there for free, because at that time I didn't know that, but if you were an escapee like us, we can use the railway system, every transportation free. So he took us there. It was closed, so the police was guarding. They let us in, they had no more room, so they put two benches together, and we put one coat on bottom, one top, we there, to stay there overnight. Then I remember, my wife remembered that they had a very far relative who lives in Vienna, and she knew the address.
How?
So we went there. I never knew. They introduced ourselves. Oh, no problem, come on, eat something, everything. And then took us, and my in-laws and the two sisters, they were in Linz. Funny thing. They put them in, it was a bordello. The main floor was the immigrants, and the top floor was the business. You know? So anyway, we went to the train, they took us out, we there, and everything lived there, and then we went to the joint. And you know who was the joint pass? Who is a famous person who was checking who escaped, no. Hirtelen, no. Pardon me?
Wiesenthal?
Who?
Wiesenthal?
No, who catched Eichmann?
Who?
Eichmann, they have...
Eichmann?
Hmm?
Who caught Eichmann?
Yeah, he was the joint, he was in Linz because Eichmann family lived in Linz. And he was watching it if he cuts around. We hated him till we found out that what he was doing was very short-tempered, very curt, everything. So anyway, we got about 1 week in a hotel, and then we moved in a World War II concentration camp, which was about 40 people, men, women together in one room, you know, everything, but it's run by the German Red Cross. The food was awful. But another awful thing was another part of the concentration camp lived those guys who during the war, they were fascists, but they couldn't go back, so they stayed in Austria. And they lived in there because one reason, they were in the black market business, and was a rule. the police cannot arrest you unless you kill somebody in that concentration camp. So they did the black marketing in that concentration camp because they never could go any other country because they have the record, you know, that they did commercial crimes. Anyway, then we applied for immigration to Canada, and it was very tough. We had to go through a personal interview. They checked your education.
Why Canada?
Pardon me?
Why Canada?
2 reasons. Well, actually, I wanted to go to Israel very much, but my father-in-law and the others, they didn't. And the reason why Canada got chosen, 2 reasons. My father-in-law had here some relatives. Second thing, they wanted to be as far away from Europe as possible. And anyway, we went through very tough medical and everything, not like here, you know, that you just walk in. And we got in Canada.
How did you get here?
We flew in. The United Nations paid for the flight. We flew in Montreal. Then a bus took us, which used to be, I don't know, a monastery or something. So we stayed there overnight, and the morning they came the U.S. Canadian custom, and they checked us out, and they gave us $10. Okay, and
each.
Yeah, and a ticket to Toronto. So at 10 o'clock in the evening we came to Toronto. We arrived, looked out, came out, where the hell I am? At that time there was nothing except the tip-top tailor. I said, where the hell we came to? So there was a guy, suddenly he was a cleaner, he was Hungarian. He said, don't worry, the bus is coming. So about 8 o'clock, they took us out in West Lodge on Queen Street, which was once upon a time a nunnery. Nuns used to live there. And women lived one floor, men lived on the other floor. And 2 days later, I got a job, motorboat mechanic. And
how did you get the job?
They advertised in the temporary shelter. They looked for skilled labor. And
in what language?
Pardon me?
What language?
Well, they own English, but they translated to be Hungarian. You know? And I had a dictionary, and I started to read every day 30 words. That's my accent is terrible. I can read, I can write perfect English, but I have an accent. Because that's how I learned English, that every day I sit down and wrote down 30 times the same words 30 times. So after 6 months, I could read, talk, just very, very bad accent.
What year was it?
1957. And Toronto was like a village to me.
What did you bring with you?
Well, I was motorboat mechanic. That this guy started during the Revolution, the biggest anti-Semite I ever worked. I never could say it, I was a Jew. His customers were not bigger, 50% were Jews. This was expensive, 57, a motorboat was $3,000. But in the meantime, he hated the Jews, they said that verbally. So anyway, I worked there, and this is a seasonal job. So in September it was finished. I worked 60 hours a week. Then I got a job. I heard about that downtown there was a steel manufacturer. They looked at that workers there. And I had to sign a paper, release them responsibility. The requirement was 175 pounds and 5'7". I was 110 pounds and 5'4". You know? And we built for this, how would you call it, for the hydro build this big, for the plates and everything. It was a very big, and boilers and stuff like that. And the worst thing was, that you are on the top of the boiler, because what happens there is that they give you a little click and you have to start welding and then moving it. Well, and in the meantime, the crane is going and carrying the heavy stuff, and every day somebody got killed. Every day. Anyway, that job lasted for about 4 months, but very well paid, so happened. So at that time, the whole family, including father-in-law, we moved in a 3-bedroom apartment. And I tried everything. I was temporary help for postman, everything, but we survived. And then I heard about they have a company called Aircraft Appliances. And another thing I heard that they have a book which tells you which company went bankrupt. And I found a company about in the air business in Winnipeg which went bankrupt 2 years ago. I worked there. I wasn't even in Canada. Anyway, I got the job as an assembly technician, and I worked myself. We were all, I was the only Jew, and everybody was German. I didn't have a good feeling, but what could you do? And after about 7 months, I got my own department, where certain aircraft stuff, which is as I was doing, and a special room which cleaned and everything. And in the meantime, I found out mechanically I was very good, but electronics-wise I was very weak. So I went to a private college in electronics, and I finished that. And I got, at that time, the Professional Engineering Association had papers for technologists, technicians, so I got a technologist paper, which was the highest. And I heard that opening a new company just across the road, aircraft lithium system. I went over there, I went through the test, and I got hired. A wage then I got was better. I was the 4th guy they hired. Then we had so much work. We did all the work for the Air Force, navigation equipments, bomb task computers. Then 6 months later, I was group leader. Then a year later, I went to the whole system, not just one part of it, but the whole system, testing. From there, I became test specialist, because you want, if any new product designed in the United States, I went on, because they designed in laboratory condition, and I set up how to make it in here, a mass production with unskilled labor. And I worked there for 40 years. And the company was fantastic, because if I was away more than 3 weeks, which a lot of times happened, my family got a plane ticket. So can you imagine, they came down to Los Angeles. In the morning, they gave me apartment rental. I had a car. My wife drove me to work. She had the car, and they went all over Disney's, movie studios, everything. In the evening, she picked me up. And we had a 3 days holiday. We drove down to Las Vegas with the kids to see it. But sometime I was away as much as 6 months. Then I went, sometime they sent me out. Salt Lake City, they opened up a factory, so I went down to train them. So my wife came down, she was there for 3 weeks. We never saw a hotel where we were staying. It was not luxury, it was above there. They call it Little America. That was fantastic. And like I said, we worked, and everybody, actually, my brother-in-law, 2 brother-in-law, they really made that. One of them, he was a upholsterer, and he just died. That he had a big custom-built furniture store. The building, everything is his in here. Right now, his son is running it. And my other brother-in-law came out and he started us a tile maker to tile setter, and he built about 5,000 homes.
Why do you think that is?
Pardon me?
Why do you think you all did so well?
Well, everybody wanted to push, and we were very good friends. The only reason I bought this house, my father-in-law bought it, we didn't know, but I had a home in Danesbury Avenue, and my father-in-law bought a home next door. That was he was. And my daughter was the oldest, European standard, feel responsible for the family. So we found, the fourth year sign was on this building, and she said, let's buy it so I can look after them. And we bought it. And in 1971, my father died, and my mother, because they said they won't come out together as long as they live. He died, and 2 months later, my mother was here with us for 10 beautiful years. And the family, the kids are all done very good. One of them is a professor at the York University. His wife is a doctor. The other kids, lawyers. So like I said, everybody in the family has university. My son, at the age of 4.5, started competing in swimming, because I firmly believe on it, you have to be strong. And my son at 4.5 started swimming and swam till the age of 24. And he was one of the top swimmers. He competed in Israel twice on the Maccabi game and was bronze medalist. But at summers, from the age of 15, he worked in construction, because that's where the most money. He worked, he used to come home, he looks like hell. But he paid for his university, he has his own car. And then he went to the States, because in 3 years he got the chiropractor diploma. There he met his wife. He stayed in the States and was very, very successful. He got another degree, which he did in the evening, sport medicine, and he had 3 clinics. And I have those beautiful granddaughters. Right now, 2 of them are at the university. The third one is going to go this year. Only trouble is they divorced. And he is living in Hawaii. And his wife is a university professor as well. So like I said, our family, relatively speaking, was successful. But we worked for it. My wife went for a year for evening course. He started to work at Eaton's as a seamstress. At night time, he went to school and became a bookkeeper. He worked for the Texaco, different companies. Eventually, he became manager of a big construction company, office manager.
Did you celebrate traditions like the Jewish holidays and things when you were little, and then when you came here?
How you mean?
Like Hanukkah and Rosh Hashanah and things like that. Did you remember celebrating them as a child? Did you celebrate them here?
I tell you one thing. I never went back to Hungary. The kids speak Hungarian because the grandmother was here. How should I say? I hate them. I hate them very much. And I came in. Only thing is I'm disappointed in the Jews. I'm very much disappointed that they are segregated, ultra, this. This is not existed. They are not united. And another thing is they don't really care about the anti-Semitism or something. And the kids, they wouldn't last 5 days what we went through. The parents as well, you know. And I suggested that, but nothing came out. I suggested that why don't they make a basic self-defense course, men and women? Basic, you don't have to be expert. Just if somebody attack you, you can hit that much that you can escape. You can do it in the shul, they have room, they can do it at the JCC, everything. Nothing. We had a meeting in the shul, you know, that what to do, everything. And I said, you have to grab the young people, get them something which will interest them. So they don't want to listen to your lectures about this and that. It's a different generation. You said? But no, they don't want to believe that anything could happen. And they are not united. You know, even the communist system, we had, they call the Goldman place, a Jewish culture house where you can meet together, dance, so and so, nothing to do religion, just Jewish. We had no intermarriage because they could. Here, they can't meet a Jewish person. Unless it's arranged marriage, you can't arrange it. Nothing. You know, JCC is not a community center, I am sorry. So, that's why I say, and when we had that meeting and I said we had a program, yeah, call it kosher cafe or something, that get together 4 or 5 shul and once a month get together at DJ, they are not interested. No, like I said, it's unfortunately a North, with due respect, it's a fantastic thing what you guys are doing. Sorry, you guys, ladies. Okay, but the worst trouble is there. The kids, today kids are not reading. Everything has to be visual. So, anyway, so that's what I was, and like I said, it's one thing what he did, the Holocaust made me stronger. Some people got worse, but got stronger. And I tell you something, it wasn't easy to live under the communist system. It wasn't easy to come to Canada and start living, but we had the toughness. You didn't meet your wife. Right now she's out. She's, like I said, you know what she's doing right now? 20 kilometers running. As long as the weather is good, I'm going with her. And upstairs we have a room, we have weights, and every morning as soon as I wake up, I work as she is doing it, too, in the evening. And we're working on, she does with 50 pounds weights, 200 repeats. So don't fight with her. And she's 5'1" in 100 pounds. Till the age of 75, she was competed on 10 kilometer running. And she beat 10 years younger people. And she has on her leg a steel plate, because she broke her leg. That's why the kids bought that one, you see that? And that's so funny, they said that's her.
And do you believe in God?
Pardon me?
Do you believe in God?
Yeah.
You do believe in God?
Yeah. No, and I tell you one thing, that like, if the weather permitting, I just go with her to about 2 kilometers. Right now I'm feeling it, what I did wrong. Not wrong. My parachute jumps a little bit damaged my back. You know, I mean, they were different parachutes what we use. You really banged yourself when you came down. Actually, it's a double, because when we jumped in the water, we just used only one parachute. We had no emergency. So that's why I say, but I am proud that I saved Jewish life during the revolution. And I fought against the fascists. Unfortunate thing is that right now I don't have gun, I'm not fighting against them. You know, right now you're writing the story. What happening right now in the States and here reminds me of the 1940s. How is it started? The hate, everything, At the same time, I don't understand that. We have, Jews didn't get anything free. I had a black guy, I worked with him. He didn't know at that time I am Jewish. And he started to talk about Jews. I said, why are you hating Jews? Because they have everything and they don't give it to me. They don't give me nothing. I said, don't you think that you have to work for what you're getting? No, they don't want that. Just baseball, basketball, and free hand. I never was racist still. And same, you go to certain areas, I don't know if you've been there, you don't see an English sign. And Malton, I don't know if you've been in Malton. It's just right in the Toronto border where the airport was. They used to call it the police city because there used to live the policemen because it was cheap living. You go over there and you don't see a white man. Years ago, they did something about a swimming race or something, and they sent me out to help them out with the swimming pool. I was shocked. And like that, but like I said, and the trouble is there that we don't stand up. I still highly would recommend that the Jewish community, in the schools, in the JCC, basic self-defense. Basic. And the young people, 18 to 25, they can become shomrins, giving a couple of hours that night time, driving around, see if everything is okay, nobody does anything. Like I said, to be quite honest with you, I'm still sorry that I didn't went to Israel.
Do you have any other memories or stories or anything that you want to share? Any thoughts about what you went through?
Like I said, we didn't know what is luxury. Basically what happens then is when you look at that in Europe, the Jews went to professions where they can carry it with them. Because there are a lot of times they order the Jews to leave the country. I don't know if it's an old story that one of the king kicked out the Jews from Hungary and 2 days later begged them to come back because everything went dead. Because there used to be a saying, the Hungarian aristocrat is very proud, he doesn't write and doesn't read. But I tell you one thing, it wasn't easy to be a Jew in the fascist area. Wasn't easy. You had to be careful to be a Jew in where the communist system was. In the communist system. How should I say it? You had to keep your mouth shut. Mind you, what difference makes if I say that the Prime Minister is stupid? No, you had to be careful. And another thing was, like on high holiday, depending on your position, you had to sneak into the shul. Because, like in my position, they didn't expect that I go to shul. So I used to create an accident 2 or 3 days before, where I looks like I am hurt. And that's holidays, and when I went, I had my hat done because actually they used to have cameras to watching the people who going there in the communist system. So that's all. But to be honest with you, they made me Jew, not religious, just Jew, because during the Holocaust, unfortunately, rabbis always said, don't do nothing, God's gonna help you. I don't know if you heard about the story of Satmar Rabbi. Okay. He is one of the ultra-Orthodox. And the Zionist underground arranged that with the Romanian border guard, first people, that 20,000 Jews could escape. Paper mean that. Then this rabbi, Satmar Rabbi, said, no, they are shegets, they are not real Jews. So they teared up the papers and they took them deportation. In the meantime, they had a gold train. You heard about the gold train? Okay. The Germans did a deal. You give us so much, they call it in gold or dollar, and they let 3,000 Jews on the train to go to Switzerland. And guess who was on it? Him. So like I said, I was very upset myself about to be Jew. However, and the communist system, everything, then I said, doesn't matter what system I am a Jew, so I'm gonna be a good Jew. I'm not ultra-Orthodox or anything, but I am down to the shul for two reasons. That's the only place where I can meet Jews. There's no other place I can meet. You know what I mean? And like I said, that I don't buy that what a rabbi say every time other things, but I try to live. I rewrote the Ten Commandments. You know that Commandments say, "Thou shalt not kill." No, I say, "Thou shalt not let yourself to be killed." But, so anyway, that's my story, and like I said, I'm a little bit militant. The unfortunate thing is, I am getting too old to do too much. But I am unfortunately what I see is, that the present generations, including my own family, they don't care anymore what happened. To them is the Holocaust just like a Haggadah. And even the survivors, lots of them doesn't want to even talk about it. Like my wife. She doesn't want to talk about it. She said, don't talk about it, don't bring it up. And unfortunate thing is that it's wrongly understood. What I have been thinking is, that you have to do it because you have to fight against it. By forgetting it doesn't help. Okay, helps nerve, because everybody knows. Because a lot of people came out very damaged from the Holocaust. And my beloved mother and father, they never got depressed, depressed. They survived and they really went through things which a lot of people wouldn't even think about it.
Do you want to show your picture?
Pardon me?
Do you want to show and talk about your picture a little bit?
Okay. Well, that picture,
Do you want,
You can just put it behind.
do you want to put it in front of you?
okay. All right. This picture is used only on special. Oh, it's my wife, I think. Yes? Come on in. Come on in. We have a guest. Come on in.
Guest?
Yes.
Oh, I couldn't get around with it. That doesn't matter.
Okay. It's my wife, Edith.
Hi. How are you?
Okay. How far did you walk? Okay. Okay. Normally we use the 14 DC twists to do the parachute jumps, except when you're having special competitions or special deals to do. That's when we're having a two-seater aircraft and just the pilot and the jumper is in it. And you telling at the pilot where to go, how to go. On the ground, they have a target, a circle, which is about 50-meter diameter. And one of the things is that how close you coming to the center of that things. So this was picture taken on the national championship where I won the target, the closest to the target, the shot.
Wow. That's in Hungary.
Actually, you had to do it twice. And the average of the two, which tells you that where you are. And what you do is you sitting in here, and then you climbing out on the wing, hanging down, and directing the pilot, and then you go, just slide off. Just slide off here. You're standing in here when you climb out, you know, to the pilot directing, and then you slide out.
Wow. Do you have any other pictures you want to show?
Pardon me?
Do you have any other pictures you want to show?
No, unfortunately, this is the only thing.
Your granddaughters?
Only thing I have is just that certificate in here. From the government.
Oh, nice. For swimming?
Pardon me?
For swimming?
Yes.
Thank you.
Otherwise, no pictures, because when we came out, we didn't bought anything with us.
Thank you very much.
Actually, my wife bought this. Not my mother bought that one picture out.
Which picture? This?
Yes, this one.
That's the one picture your mother brought?
Yeah.
Really?
That's the only one.
Wow. All the pictures.
Yeah.
Huh?
And I had a set of pictures, but my daughter never gave it to me. That's the set of pictures that here is the plane. I jump out, free fall. I took some pictures of the free fall.
You should tell her to give you a copy.
Hmm?
You tell her to give you a copy. It's such a great thing to have. Not
Yes.
every